Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hatfield. This week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Daemon.
And from IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond, Jada Griffin joins us. Welcome back, Jada.
Hey, glad to be back.
This week we talk about Square Enix and its future multi-platform plans. There's been a lot of talk recently about the struggles Square Enix has been experiencing lately. It's almost a direct opposite of what Capcom is going through lately. Capcom just experienced its 11th consecutive year of growth, 11 consecutive year of profits, by releasing a string of successful, highly well-received multi-platform games, whereas Square Enix just in the past 12 months released 3 PlayStation 5 exclusives, and now it is admitted that all 3 of them, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI, and Foam Stars, failed to meet its expectations. Amid tumbling profits, Square Enix announced what it calls Square Enix Reboots and Awakens. Things are so dire, Square Enix is rebooting itself. It's a 3-year plan for rebooting for long-term growth. This involves a rethink across all parts of the business, but the highlight is a shift to a multi-platform strategy. Square Enix said it will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. There we have it. Ryan, is Final Fantasy, whatever the third part of the remake is, does that arrive on Xbox day one?
Possibly not. That might be the last thing that doesn't, because I think the odds are better than not that Sony probably signed an exclusivity deal for the entire Final Fantasy VII Remake, what we now know will be a trilogy, and I'm sure Square Enix and Sony knew that in the beginning. I don't think they were sort of just seeing how it went. So yeah, I think there's a very good chance that Part 3 remains a PlayStation exclusive, but at the end of that deal, which I think take the educated guess would be fair to say that it'll be 1 year after the release of Part 3, then it would come to Xbox. And the question I have, Daemon, is how much will it cost? Because this is a really unique situation where even though it's technically one game and 3 parts, it's been so far 2 large, full role-playing games on their own. The first one was a $60 PlayStation 4 game. The second one on PS5, now $70. We can expect Part 3 to be $70. So we're talking about $200 worth of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So is it going to all be bundled together for Xbox and PC as a $200 package? Are they going to break it out into separate pieces if you just want to buy Part 1 and see if you like it and see how it goes? That part of it's a little interesting to think about, kind of a unique situation, but yeah, I do think that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is likely to still be subjected to it'll be one of the last PlayStation exclusives that Square Enix does per this new policy.
Well, Jada, what's your read on this as a sort of a PlayStation expert? Is this a loss to Sony losing exclusivity to certain key Square Enix games, even though, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI, they don't seem to really be console sellers as maybe they originally anticipated?
I think the only people that are going to see it as a loss are the people who use it in arguments to prove that their toy box is better than the other toy box. I think that's the only place that's really going to be considered a loss. Yes, it is great. I love being a PlayStation player and knowing that I have these awesome exclusives, these awesome games coming to PlayStation. But, I mean, the more people that play the games, the more people you have to talk about with these games, the more people that spread these games via word of mouth. This is only going to be good for Square Enix. Will it potentially hurt Sony in the long run? Maybe. But as we've been seeing, obviously and as you just said, Daemon, they haven't been the big console sellers. The names themselves, Final Fantasy doesn't carry as much weight as it used to 10, 15, 20 years ago. It doesn't carry as much weight with the modern generation of gamers. It just doesn't. And it's sad because I love Final Fantasy. It's one of my favorite IPs out there. But it just doesn't have that power. And so I don't know. So hopefully by going third party, maybe it can help regain some of that magic. as you know, and to Ryan's point about like how this is going to get bundled, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some sort of much cheaper bundle with all three packed in one, because we saw when Rebirth came out, they leading up to launch, they bundled Remake and Rebirth together for $70. So I think, you know, they will probably pass on getting as much money as possible from people wanting to play the full trilogy on Xbox, and just trying to get more money out of it in general by getting people to just pick it up and play it. So I could see them doing probably like, maybe it's a $90 thing, and it's like, so it's a value people see. It's like, oh, it's $30 per game. Great. It's a little bit more expensive than a normal game, but I'm getting 3 full games out of it. Rebirth had a lot of stuff holding against it. Like, it's the second game in a massive franchise. If you didn't play the first one, you're like, oh, do I need to play the full $70 to play Remake and go play through that? It was a lot of stuff. So they had a lot of things working against it. So I'm not surprised it's not living up to their expectations, but we've seen this song and dance from Square Enix many, many times where this game did not meet expectations. This game did not meet expectations. It feels like it is the one like regular thing we hear from them at every year.
Well, in the top comment on this on our news article about Square Enix rebooting itself, it's from Deacon Black 2. It reads, "It's almost like the heads of Xbox have been right all along. Exclusives aren't sustainable. Games are too expensive to make now, along with everything else in life costing more. No one specific console can sell enough copies unless every player that owns one buys a copy of the game." Ryan, do you agree? Were the heads of Xbox right all along? Exclusives are not sustainable, or is it just these 3 particular exclusives were not sustainable for Square Enix?
Well, I think you could challenge that assertion if you're just looking at Xbox saying it, because well, you guys are in third place. If exclusives for you aren't going to sell as much as exclusives on other platform because of the installed base, but now this Square Enix thing, I think, is a legitimate. You can really start to legitimize that argument, because it's not like you can say that Square Enix, quote unquote, backed the wrong horse and they signed an exclusivity deal with the third place console platform. No, they signed a deal with the first place console platform, and these extremely high budget AAA games still did not see the return on investment, even with the marketing, with the hype, with the exclusivity on PlayStation. It didn't happen. So I think, yeah, we are getting to this point where it's that exclusives are probably going to be fewer and further between, whether they're first party. I mean, maybe less so certainly on first party, but certainly on the third party side of things.
Well, Stellar Blade will be an interesting case study, another PlayStation 5 exclusive. We don't have any info yet on how well it's selling. If it does go on to sell really well, then that puts a dent in the argument that exclusives don't work anymore. Jada, do you have any sort of sense of how well Stellar Blade has been doing? I know there was a lot of hype around its release, but did people actually go out and buy it?
I mean, if I remember correctly, they posted something about like their demos downloaded for Stellar Blade on PS5, and if a good large portion of those converted into actual sales, then it's probably going to show up as a success, despite being exclusive to one console. Like you said, like we haven't seen any numbers. I feel like a good amount of people picked it up, but also I feel like all the buzz around this is kind of already dissipated after, and it was kind of being propped up by all of the silly nonsense about outfits and censorship and stuff that was going on. That's what kind of took over the conversation, sadly, for this game, instead of letting everybody talking about just how fantastic of an action game it was. So it'll be interesting to see if we see more conversations around this, especially, we're gearing up almost halfway through the year now. If it makes it through to, nominees for Game of the Year, so we're still waiting to see what other stuff's coming out, but it'll be interesting to see where Stellar Blade lands.
I mean, certainly Helldivers 2 is a great recent example of an exclusive being a success. I believe 12 million copies sold was the number thrown out.
In 12 weeks.
Yeah, but you can't ignore the fact that that was a PlayStation exclusive that was day and date with PC rather than a PC version coming literal years later, the PC piece of it factored in quite a lot to Helldivers 2's success. So certainly, they deserve a ton of credit for shipping a great game, but yeah, it's if I wonder what that would have looked like without the support and the enthusiasm from the PC player base right at launch to get that going, sort of just to further go at this point of exclusives going, a little bit more by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a sort of side note to this talk of exclusivity, we learned today, according to one analyst, Sony shipped roughly 5 times as many PS5s in the last quarter than Xbox shipped Series X and S consoles. So shipping at a 5-to-1 ratio. And what I thought was interesting in the comments of this article, there wasn't a lot of like dunking on Xbox or PS5 fanboys sort of like bragging about this. I saw a lot of comments about, it's interesting that there isn't an obvious reason for there to be that big of a divide this generation, because the two consoles, PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, are very comparable in terms of capabilities and power. And this generation, like we're just talking about, Sony is not sitting on a pile of amazing exclusive games that you can only play on PlayStation 5. So it seems like that disparity is just coasting on goodwill that Sony earned last gen during the PS4 generation. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair to say. Just like, the PS4 kind of had to recover a little bit from the PS3, even though Sony had kind of started to get it together towards the end of the PlayStation 3 generation. But yeah, like I think there is definitely something to that. I mean, the Xbox One, somebody will immediately start typing the comment about, well, the Xbox One didn't benefit at all from the 360's insane success, but that was sort of a historical anomaly of basically everything going wrong for the Xbox One, which was Microsoft's fault. It didn't just happen to them. They made bad choices, and they did it right from the moment they unveiled the console on up through that E3 of the price point and bundling it with Kinect and the whole laundry list of things that I don't need to rehash again here. But yeah, I do think that this generation, it's neither one has really shown $500 worth of investment. Not that there aren't great games, but as you were both pointing out, so many games that this gen that are great, you can also play on your PS4 or in some of the cases, Xbox One as well.
Yeah, Sony has now sold nearly 60 million PS5s. It's just barely tracking behind where PS4 was at this point in the generation. Jada, PS4 is actually, it's done something really impressive, something that I thought no console would ever do. It's like within striking distance of reaching PS2's sales numbers of like 155 million sold. So at this rate, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing PS5 matching the PS4's success this generation. What do you think?
I agree. I don't think the PS5 is going to hit that high point. To Ryan's point of it, both consoles kind of lacking that, like, oh, I immediately see that $500 investment. I see what I'm getting out of this. I just moved and I was looking at the boxes for all my consoles as I like packed them up, and like almost all my consoles have like 4 to 5 or 6 pictures of games on the boxes, and both my Xbox Series X and my PS5 box are just like, hey, we've got 8K and 120 or 60 FPS. I'm like, cool, but like, where are the games? And that's the thing, that when somebody is looking at buying a console, they're not looking at it like, oh, this has got the best graphics. Like, yes, they're looking at that, but they're also like, the thing that pushes them towards a console is like, what game am I going to play to take advantage of these graphics? What game am I going to play to take advantage of all these new generational hardware leaps? Like, I need to see the games. And I think that's, one of those things. Hopefully, we start to see some showcases that are going to showcase some big stuff that's going to come in the second half of these consoles' lifespans. That's really going to like increase the urgency for people to want to go and pick up these consoles. But as of right now, based on current trends, I don't see the PS5 hitting that PS4 target goal or a PS4 sales numbers.
I mean, it's really not a great sign for either Sony or Microsoft when gaming, we hear all about how gaming has grown and continues to grow so much every year and over the years. And yet Sony, for all its success over the last generation and a half, they have not touched the PS2, and Xbox hasn't touched the 360 in terms of units sold. So those gamers they're not going to consoles. They're going to PCs, they're going to mobile phones. And so that's, again, you kind of talk about exclusives and what's the future of those, and you have to again circle back to that. Well, Microsoft may very well, and I think it's probably more likely than not that they're going to be proven right at the end of the day, even though they're kind of suffering the messaging pains of it now.
Yeah, it's true. The growth is happening on PC, mobile, and Nintendo. Funnily enough.
Yep.
And speaking of Nintendo, we have the results of last episode's poll. We were talking about all the rumored details about the Nintendo Switch 2. We asked you which Switch 2 rumored feature, is most important to you. By a landslide, backward compatibility came out on top, beating out things like 4K, an improved Joy-Con, larger screen. Everybody wants backwards compatibility for the Switch 2. So hopefully Nintendo is paying attention to that. New poll for you to vote on for next episode. Speaking of Square Enix, what's your favorite Square Enix franchise? Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Kingdom Hearts, something else? Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. We'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Jada and Ryan. Thank you to Jobert, Ryan, everyone working behind the scenes here in our LA studio to make this episode possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more of the latest on the latest gaming hardware. We'll see you then.